Man, you guys are totally out of my spit zone. You're safe. Cool. All right, does this look like the right place? 10 steps to mastering cybersecurity for parents. Is that what you're here for? I'm Kip Boyle. I'm the founder and I'm the CEO of Cyber Risk Opportunities. We're a 2.5-year-old company, and our mission is to help executives become better cyber risk managers. So that's what we do. And why am I talking about cybersecurity for parents? Well, I will give you a more complete explanation as we go along, but I think it's important to realize that as parents, you are the executive decision maker of your home. And you may not think of it like that, but you are. And you may not realize that you have cyber risks, but you do. And so that's what, so this message that I'm giving to parents is around thinking like an executive, recognizing your cyber risks, and then acting accordingly. Right? So just wanted to frame it out for you. So I want you to think for a moment about what do you think is the most likely cyber risk thing that will happen to your family? Like think of like a bad thing that could happen to your family, and then think about because there's a whole bunch of bad things that could happen, right? So think about the different bad things that could happen, and then ask yourself, what's the most likely of those bad things that could happen to us? And think about that for a moment, and then let me know when you want to shout out, what do you think is the most likely bad thing that's going to happen to a family with children from being on the internet? Anybody? Cyberbullying? Yeah, that's up there. What else? Yeah, so you could get ransomware on your computer and then all your files are locked up. Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking of something else. Say that again? Who they're interacting with. Yeah, absolutely. That's an issue. So it could be inappropriate relationships, unhealthy relationships, and we're getting closer to what I'm thinking of. How about inappropriate content, right? So you got to think about all the stuff that's at risk. You got to think about it from what are the threats that are facing you, and what could you lose in the process? Think about your assets, right? So we mentioned some assets here. So we talked about our time, right? It takes time to deal with bad things when they happen, right? So if your identity gets stolen, you're going to spend hours trying to deal with that. Right? And if you get ransomware on your PC, then you're going to spend a lot of time dealing with that too, right? So you've got time, you've got your memories in the form of these photos, your files, all the things that you're working on. And so all these things are at risk. So you should be thinking about that as you decide, how as the executive of my household, and if you're married, if you have a significant other, then you've got a co-executive, don't you? Right? You've got this dual CEO thing going on in your home, right? And so you've got to figure that out too. So some of this stuff is minor, fairly minor. Some of this stuff though can be very, very major. And but I want to tell you, based on my research and based on my experience, the most likely really bad thing that can happen is that your teenager becomes addicted to pornography. How many would have guessed that? Is that a surprise? Right? That's actually the most likely thing that's going to happen to families. This is my family. My wife and I have 6 kids, and they're all in this photo. And somehow only Ava decided to, give us the stink eye. Everybody else kind of cooperated. So that was pretty good. Now I'm showing you my family because we've been significantly impacted by unrestricted internet access. One of my kiddos became addicted to internet pornography. And I'm not going to tell you who, because I don't think that's right. And if you ever meet my kids, don't ask them, because that would not be right either. But I think it's really important for you to understand that I am talking to you not just as a guy who knows something about cybersecurity, because I do, and not because I've got work history in positions of managerial responsibility, because I have, but this is kind of a story about, you would think of all the people in the world that could have this happen to them, like maybe it wouldn't happen to a guy with my experience, right? It's like, well, geez, Kip's a professional cyber risk manager, right? He should have all this covered. And I didn't. Totally blind to this until it bit us hard. And so after that happened, and we're still dealing with the fallout of that, and I'm going to explain, why this is an insidious long-term issue for any family that has this happen to them. And so I want to share our story, and I want to talk to you about what you can do. So here's some statistics. 9 out of 10 boys, right? 6 out of 10 girls. So think about that. I've got 2 sons and 4 daughters. 9 out of 10 boys, 6 out of 10 girls are exposed to internet pornography before the age of 18. And the first exposure for boys, on average, is how old do you think? On average, it's 12. But if that's average, then you know it's happening younger and you know that it's happening older, right? So if you've got a tween, right, because apparently that's what we call kids that aren't quite teenagers but kind of start acting a little bit like teenagers every now and then, right? So, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, kind of leading up to the teenage years, they're susceptible to this. It could happen. Now, the reason why this is a big deal is because, and by the way, I'm not here to talk to you about whether porn's good, bad, or otherwise. I'm not here to give you a morality play on pornography. I don't care. And I just don't care. That's not what we're here about. What we're here about is to talk about the effect of pornography on an undeveloped brain. We know from the studies that it is insidious. There's an insidious effect on kids that get exposed to pornography. And the reason why is because, and if you've ever read the National Geographic article, the prefrontal cortex, which is the location of executive decision-making in our brains. So this is the part of the brain where you see a delicious, yummy, not so nutritious cookie and you go to grab for it because your amygdala, your reptilian brain says, ooh, yum, sugar. And then this part of your brain says, wait, you're a middle-aged man now. That is not a good idea. You should hold yourself back a little bit. Like, didn't you already have one of those today? Like, you've had your quota, right? So this part of my brain, this executive function, is underdeveloped in teenagers, which is to say they are just as brain damaged as you think. Those dumbass decisions that they make and the trouble that they get in is because this part of their brain isn't fully baked yet, right? It's only firing like 50%. Well, what happens with pornography is, you guys heard of dopamine? So dopamine is this really great chemical that gets released when something cool happens. And it actually conditions your brain. And it's the basis for some forms of addiction. And in a brain that's undeveloped in the prefrontal cortex, dopamine actually changes that part of the brain while it's still in development. So you're talking about a brain that's actually being warped by large dosages of dopamine that's coming from viewing these images, these videos. And boys are particularly susceptible because genetically boys are more visually oriented. I mean, we just know that, right? It's not a judgment on girls, it's just the way it is. And so boys are a bit more susceptible to this. But if you think about it, right, so they don't have the kind of self-control capacity that an adult has. And that's one of the reasons why they fall for this stuff. So I'm not going to drill any more into this. I just want to make you aware of, like the top issue for you. I'm going to tell you about what you can do to prevent it from happening. But if you want to know more about this, like if you want to drill more into it, you could go to this site here, Fight the New Drug. And you can see it's gotten some pretty good coverage in the media. And you can go here and you can get some additional statistics and you can learn a little bit more so that you can make your own decision about, how big of a threat is this for me and for my family, and how do I want to deal with this? Because I think as a parent, you have the right to figure out how you want to deal with this, what tools and different techniques you want to bring into the situation. I'm going to give you a lot of suggestions. Now, not only do we have websites that tell us about what the risk is, but we actually we have treatments now, treatment centers, programs that you can go to actually recover from this addiction. It is an addiction, and you have to go into recovery. in order to really get out of it, right? Depending on the severity of it. And so if you go to fortifyprogram.org, Fortify, fortifyprogram.org, you can learn about how do kids with internet porn addictions, how do they actually recover from that? What do you do? So that's the first thing, is I want you to know what's at risk and what are some of the things that can happen. So the second thing is you want to do as a parent is you want to focus on more than just the technology. So the fact that there's internet access in your home through a desktop, a laptop, a mobile phone, a tablet, a smart TV, a plush toy, right? The internet is in your home in a big way, and that's all about technology. But in order for you to deal with this issue and to manage your risks, you're going to have to think about more than just technology, and we're going to get into that. So I want to open up your mind to that reality. Social engineering, phishing, phone calls. Anybody get a phone call from somebody who said they're from BECU, but it turned out that they weren't? So Rob did. So that's going on. So there's call centers of people in Eastern Europe and Asia, and they actually call Americans. They've profiled you. They either know where you bank at, or they strongly suspect, and they'll call you and they'll try to social engineer banking information out of you. And they sound really, really convincing. They're very, very good, right? So that's another thing you got to watch out for, is these crazy phone calls, work from home scams, money mules. So that's how online criminals get a lot of money out of the country, is they'll recruit Americans who want to work from home. Those Americans will then receive stolen merchandise that was purchased fraudulently with a stolen credit card, and then they'll turn around and they'll ship it off. And that's kind of how some of this merchandise gets out. Or they'll get money wired into their checking account. They'll be told they can keep 10%, and then they wire the money off to some offshore bank account from that point. Well, the problem with that is that when the postal inspector comes and does the investigation, or the bank examiner comes and does the investigation, because you're living in the United States and they know where you are, you're going to get busted for that stuff. And the people outside of the country that just took possession of that money is a totally different story. So there's a lot of people getting hurt because they're facilitating theft on an international scale, and they don't necessarily realize it. So another thing I want to encourage you to do is, since I'm telling you don't think about technology exclusively, I'm also trying to make you understand that cybersecurity for your house is a journey. It's not a thing you buy. It's not a talk you attend, right? Although this is helpful, right? You can go to talks and you can read websites and you can buy stuff, and that's all very good. But it's really about your journey, right? It's how you get there. It's how you raise your children. It's how you celebrate holidays with them, and how you coach them through the bad times and all that stuff, right? This is a journey. So what you do every day is going to make the difference, and more of that I think is going to come out as I dive into the specific tips that I have for you. But just think about a money belt. If you go on vacation or you go on a business trip and you go to like a sketchy country where you think, geez, I looked up the travel advisories and there's pickpockets, and so, I could lose my money, I could lose my credit card, my passport. So you're like, I'm going to go get a money belt. And you know what those things are, right? You wear them under your clothes, and they don't feel very good, and they're awkward and uncomfortable, and every time you want to get into one, you got to be careful, right? Because you don't want anybody to see that you actually have one. So wearing a money belt is about your journey, isn't it? It's about going someplace, keeping your stuff safe, and getting back. Money belts are not about fashion statements, are they? Nobody buys a money belt because it looks good. They buy it because they're on a journey and they want to be protected. So I just want to encourage you to think about this as a journey. And so some things are going to work well, and then you're going to have to throw them away because your kids get older and they don't work so well anymore. Then you're going to have to find different techniques, right? And some products are going to work well, but then they don't work well anymore, and you got to get rid of those and you have to get a different product, right? So be thinking about principles, and then think about tools and tactics as stuff that you can adopt and throw away. Now, changing or developing new habits are super hard. There's whole books out there about how difficult it is to drop a bad habit or pick up a new one, and and sometimes it's going to feel like you're this little guy up here. See this? Climbing this sheer ice wall, right? Cold. Don't let go, right? Not fun. I guess he's probably having fun, but if your journey is this every day, That's horrible. And sometimes in your journey, you're going to feel like you're just clinging to this ice wall because you're going to have to, confront your kids on something that just doesn't feel very good. But you'll get through it, okay? So I want to encourage you and make one change at a time. I'm going to give you a bunch of suggestions. Please don't run home and say, we're going to do all this stuff, right? You're going to overload people. Don't do that, right? So there's an organizational change control dimension to this, isn't there, right? Don't spring it all on them at once. Pick one, get it going. Pick another one, get it going, kind of go that way. Now, as much as there's risks here, I also want to encourage you to think of this as a great opportunity, all right? So if the name of my company is Cyber Risk Opportunities, right? And I've named it that way for a reason, because anytime you encounter a risk, something bad could happen, but also something good could happen too, right? That's kind of the nature of risk. You start a company because you want to grow it into something, and hopefully you reap some financial reward, some professional reward. Perhaps you want recognition, but then there's also risks too, right? You could fail. But I want you to focus on the opportunity side of this particular coin, because if you do this well, you're actually going to enhance the trust that you have with your kids. Your trust is going to get better. Your connection to your kids is going to improve because of this, even though they won't necessarily like it. But don't forget, they have a partially baked prefrontal cortex. You literally have to do the thinking for them. They're not capable of it. And you probably remember when you had a half-baked brain and you thought you were all over it, right? You thought you knew everything. In fact, you thought you were smarter than those people. And you know now that's not right. So you should draw confidence from that. So when they complain and throw a fit and everything like that, right? Don't fall for it. Don't let the guilt thing happen to you, right? You may feel like you're on the ice wall, but don't give into it. All right. So the reason why I say this is because tip number 5, you've got to teach them personal cyber hygiene. This is a hand washing thing. I'll bet you all teach your kids, wash your hands before you sit down to eat. Wash your hands after you come in from playing. Wash your hands after you use the bathroom. But why do you do that? Anybody? What could happen if you don't wash your hands? Yeah, you can get sick. There's viruses, there's germs. But you know what's strange about hygiene is, can we see the germs? We can't see the germs, can't see the viruses, we can't see the diseases. We can see the symptoms of them, right? And the internet's very much like that, isn't it? We can't see the bad guys coming after us, can we? Until they're right there. And so I think if you can make a logical leap and say, I subscribe to germ theory, which is something that's only existed like for the past couple of 100 years in all of human history, if we can make that logical leap and believe in little things that we can't see, then I think that we can make a similar logical leap and say, I'm going to teach my kids how to wash their digital hands because there's gunk on the internet that I don't want them to touch. Right? So I hope that makes sense, right? And so if your kids say, this is stupid, I can't believe we're doing this, then you can take a step back and you can say, I know you can't see the bad stuff, but I can. And just like I taught you how to wash your hands, I'm going to teach you how to keep your digital self clean. Right? And they're still going to tell you that you're an idiot. But that's all right. That's just what they do. So what do you need to do, right? So you need to teach them in age-appropriate ways how to have great cyber hygiene. And one of those boundaries, one of those appropriate ways is you're going to talk about time limits on internet access. All right? So like one of the first boundaries one of the first cyber hygiene practices that you can get into is time restrictions. Right? And there's other things we can talk about too, but it all comes around, I think, it all comes back to setting appropriate, healthy boundaries, just like you do with anything else. Would you let your kids roam around on First Avenue in Seattle, around Pioneer Square, or the market, where the peep shows are? You wouldn't, would you? That's a boundary you wouldn't willingly violate. And yet, the internet, guess what, is a fast speed expressway to everything on First Avenue and more, isn't it? Yeah, we've all seen it. I have. I've seen it in part because I was so curious I couldn't help myself. And because I had to do some investigations when I was the Chief Information Security Officer because people were looking at that crap on the clock. And I had to go gather the evidence to prove it so I could, introduce them to their next opportunity. Is it hard to find? It's not. You, as the parent, are the only person standing in the way, quite frankly. At the end of the day, it's you. So let's talk about practical stuff now. All right, I've prepped you. Hopefully your executive function is ready to take this stuff in. Google, God bless them, did a study recently, and they published the results. They surveyed about 300 non-experts on what their top online safety practices were, and then they surveyed about 300 experts. And an expert was somebody who had 5 or more years of experience working with cybersecurity. And they said, what are your top 5s? Let's look at the list. Here's the non-expert top 5, and here's the expert top 5. Take that in for a moment. Are they the same? They're different. Is that surprising to you, that they're different? The reason I'm showing this to you is because you'd better be over here. And when I talk about the definition of good cyber hygiene for your kids, that's this stuff dominantly. They're going to do what you do, and that's the end of the story. If you do this stuff, the greater the likelihood is that they're going to do that stuff. Because that's the way it is with everything, right? They're going to they want to watch the TV shows you watch. They want to go to places you go. They eat the food you eat. And that means if you're washing your digital hands, they're going to wash their digital hands. Or at least it's not going to be quite as tough to get them to do that, right? So be thinking about this, right? You want to make sure that you get your software updates going, so on and so forth. Let's step through this list, and let me help you with this. So whether you've got a Mac or whether you've got Windows, you're going to set these updates to install automatically. And with Windows 10, I don't even think you have control over that anymore, do you? Like, I'm really not a Windows user anymore. I'm kind of a Mac user. So help me. On Windows 10, can you control patching anymore? Like at home, with like a non-corporate version? No, you really can't. Okay, so yeah. So you get a point. If you're using Windows 10, you get a point because this is out of your hands now. But if you're not using Windows 10 and you need to set this up manually, I recommend that you do. Just have these things installed automatically. That's the way to go. Okay, so passwords is another top cyber hygiene practice, and so you're going to want to practice careful password management. So you want long passwords, complex, and you want them unique to every place you go. You never want to reuse the same password anywhere. You don't. And the only way you can get away with that, I think, is either not be on the internet, which sometimes I don't want to be, or you're going to need to get a password manager. So that's pretty much what it comes down to. Now, there's 2 password managers that I can recommend to you because I've studied them, and I believe that they are worth trusting all your passwords to. One of them is called 1Password, which is the icon here. That's the one I use. It's multi-platform. So you establish one store of passwords, and you can access it from any device and any operating system that you use, because I use just about everything, and I always want to have access to my passwords. So, or you can use this one called LastPass. Now, they each work a little bit differently. They each have slightly different licensing, and so I just would suggest that you go and look at each one and figure out which one you like. Maybe one's icon is nicer than the other, and then that's how you decide, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, you're going to stare at this thing a lot. So, you know, branding, I think, is probably important. But use the thing, and do not use the password managers that are built into your browsers. Do not go use the freeware password managers. Those are very bad ideas. Anybody know why? Why is free bad? Isn't free good? Yeah, it's worth what you pay for it. See, one of the reasons why I like these guys is because they charge something, and they take that money, and they use it to improve their product. And every time, and it hasn't happened very often, but it has happened, when these guys have an exploit that comes around and becomes publicly visible, they're right on it. Boom. They mobilize, they deal with it, and it's dealt with. So you can trust these guys, I think, to do the right thing, because inevitably everything has bugs, everything has an exploit, right? It's just inevitable that something bad's going to happen. But I don't know that a free password manager is going to be there for you, right, when the vulnerability comes along. So spend a couple of bucks, and then that way you don't have to worry about it. Just thought it would be interesting for you to know this is a typical password that it would be generated for you, right? Long, complex, And you don't ever have to remember it. You establish one passphrase, and then you use that passphrase anytime you want to unlock your password store, and it will automatically fill in your user ID and password boxes on the different websites that you go to, so that you don't even have to copy and paste. There's like a keystroke that you do, and it just handles it for you. It's very nice, it's super convenient, and it's secure. And usually you've got to trade off security for convenience. But in this case, I think they've done a really, really great job of balancing that. Two-factor authentication. So you can go to twofactorauth.org, and that maintains a master database of all the places that you can turn on two-factor authentication on the internet. And again, why am I telling you this? Because it's something you should be doing. You should be training your children to do this, right? If your money gets stolen out of your bank account, that's going to affect your kids, right? Yeah, because they're not going to eat because you have no money. Or you're going to go steal a loaf of bread, and then you're going to go to prison. Or whatever, right? So it all comes back, right? So Google Authenticator is free, and you can see like these one-time passcodes that it generates. I think it's pretty easy to use, and if you're attending this conference, I think you can handle it for sure. I give this talk to a lot of PTAs, elementary school, believe it or not. A lot of elementary school PTAs want my talk because they're just about to enter into this danger zone. And some of those folks really struggle because they're not technology professionals and whatnot. So I get a lot of questions about this stuff. But I know you guys can handle this. So turn this stuff on everywhere. And by the way, those questions, those terrible like security questions, those weak, ridiculous excuses for security, never answer those questions straight. Never. Always answer them crazy. All right? In which city was my father born? Vega 98133. That's the answer. And where do I store that? In my password manager. I don't have to remember. I put it in my password manager, and then if I ever end up on the phone with a customer support rep because my account's screwed up, and they ask me that question, I say Vega 98133. They think I'm weird, but then I get my account back. And nobody can use Facebook to figure out what my reset questions are, right? And by the way, don't get too crazy with this, because whatever you put there, you're going to have to actually say that out loud to somebody at some point. So, just, my boo 123 or whatever, right? Just make sure you feel comfortable saying that to a total stranger over the phone. You need to back up your data, right? So here's the Mac version of that. Time Machine is one way to go. So you can do the local backup. You can turn on file history in Windows 8 and Windows 10. You can buy an external hard drive and do the backups that way. You can do backups to the cloud, right? So here's a screenshot for Spider Oak 1. I used to recommend Crash Plan for home. It was awesome, but then they decided to pivot, and they don't sell that anymore. Now, one of the reasons why I like Spider Oak 1 and why I like Crash Plan is because you get to set your own encryption key, and then your data gets encrypted locally before it gets sent off to the cloud. So even if somebody steals all your crap off the cloud, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook. They can't do anything with it. All right? There's lots of super convenient cloud backup facilities that you can get out there. Some of them are free, but they don't encrypt your data, or they encrypt it, but they have your private key, which means they can decrypt it anytime they want. And that's not really very secure. All right? So you want to look for that feature in particular, I recommend. You want to avoid malicious code. The FBI will, if you were to call the FBI, they'd say, just pay the ransom. So do what you can to avoid it. I think Cybereason has a free ransomware software, right? Is it any good? I haven't used it. Do you know? You're still testing it? Should I infect you tomorrow? Ah, okay. Well, anyway, so there's starting to become available tools, to help prevent that sort of thing from happening, and you're going to want to watch that. But the best thing to do as far as like malicious code goes, just make sure you have great backups, right? So I back up to like 3 different locations. I synchronize to a couple of different computers. I'm just like, obsessive about it. So, and here's like, if there's only one thing you do when you leave this prezo, only one thing, stop being an administrator. Stop it. Bad parent. Don't do it. Why? Why am I telling you this? Anybody? What's wrong with being the administrator of your home computer? Come on, really? Well, it's because 90% plus of the malware out there, when it lands on your computer, assumes you're admin, and it runs amok. When you're not admin, the vast majority of that stuff is like a dud, dead on arrival. Can't do anything. Did you know that? So don't run as admin. Make separate accounts. So here Jake has got an account, Wolfram's got an account, and then you've got this administrator account. So set up your machine and then lock that thing away. Make an account for yourself, make an account for your kids. Everybody gets their own account. Don't run as administrator. If it's the one thing you do, that's what you should do. Ad blockers. I think I already told you that the ad networks are just a filthy little cesspool of grunge, right? It's not that I begrudge, publishers that want to make some money by serving up ads. I don't have a problem with that. But they got to clean up their ad networks. So I recommend that you add in an ad blocker for that reason. Flash is the devil in digital form, right? We know that. So don't use it, or if you use it, make sure it's updated all the time, and don't respond to those little pop-up boxes that says your Flash is out of date. Click here, and I'll take care of it for you. Danger, Will Robinson. Like, that's not probably legit. By the way, anytime any piece of software throws a dialog box at you and says there's a new version, would you like it? No, I wouldn't. Because I'm going to go find out for myself if that's legit, and then I'm going to pull it down myself. All right? So it goes back to the security person idea of don't let anybody push anything into your network. If you want something in your network, you pull it in because you know that that's what you want. All right, we're almost done. Step 8. You want to avoid, or you want to make it difficult to use the internet in secret. Secrecy is the breeding ground for all kinds of terrible stuff. And so you want to avoid that as much as possible. So in my house, another image I stole off the internet, my house doesn't look this nice. In my house, there's a family computer, and it sits right in the kitchen area, and everybody has an account. And if you want to use the internet or the computer, that's where you have to go. And by the way, it also teaches my kids how to share, which doesn't always go well, right? But this is kind of like, I think sometimes that they're in my house, and it's like a form of boot camp for real life, right? It's like you're going to fall down, and you're going to get mad at your siblings and stuff, and you're going to get pissed off at dad and that sort of thing. That's okay. We're going to work through all that. Because when you get to be a grown-up, right, you're going to get pissed off because you got the ticket. Your boss is going to say something you don't like. And so it's like, this is just training for all that other crap that's going to come later. So, and this also means, let's talk about mobile devices for a second. And bedrooms. There should be no mobile devices in bedrooms. There should be no computers in bedrooms. There should be no computers in any room where the door can be closed and the person using the computer can do it without being observed. The idea that the screen is facing out and that anybody walking by can see what's going on, that's a really important feeling in a kid's gut that says, I better respect the boundary. That's a really important thing. You want that threat of being discovered at any moment to be in the front of their half-baked mind. All right? That really helps. And you want some kind of content filtering. I like this one. OpenDNS. They have something called Family Shield. It's free. And in this case, free is good. And so you put this into your router, and it covers your whole house. Anybody in your house that's on Wi-Fi is going to have to work through this. So if your kid's friend comes over and tries to access the inappropriate content, then if they're using Wi-Fi, this is going to block it. Now, if they're using cellular data or LTE data, this isn't going to help you. But that's where the trust relationship between you and your kiddos comes into play, right? So you cannot put a technical control in for everything that you have to deal with. So there has to be trust at some point in order to make this work. But just wanted to show you a couple things here. You get to dial in. It's just like the content blocker at work. You get to dial in the severity of it. Or if you really want to go crazy, you can make your own. And you'll get reports. So this is what they look like. These are not the best reports in the world. And not everything that appears in this list is something that somebody's clicked on. A lot of times there's a lot of redirections that go on, right? If you've ever used an ad blocker and it tells you like this running counter of how many different things that it's blocked, all these tracking beacons and bugs and all that stuff, well, that stuff's all going to get logged in here. So if you see, right, something in there that just makes you jump out of your skin, take a deep breath, because it might not have been something somebody in your family actually clicked on. It could have been a referral. All right, so be careful, but definitely look in here and see what's going on. If you have Windows 8 or Windows 10, there's something really cool that you can use. And it's a screenshot of it right here, and it's called Family Safety. And it's kind of like having an Active Directory domain and group policy objects for the computers that are all logged into the same account. So if you're at work and Junior wants some Xbox Live time, you can say, all right, how'd those chores turn out? Got that homework completed? Yeah? Okay, cool, because I'm going to check that when I come home. I'm going to dial you up an hour. Have fun. And you can do that remotely. And when the hour's over, it's all gone. So that's pretty cool, right? Again, coming back, step 9, set and enforce boundaries. In my house, if you have a mobile device, it's because I paid for it. So guess what? That means I can have access to your mobile device anytime I want it, 24/7. And by the way, you don't get a lock code that I don't know. I can walk up to you at any moment and say, may I have your mobile phone, please? Or may I have your tablet, please? And I can inspect everything that goes on in there. And if I see that you've been wiping logs and wiping history, confiscated. Gone. 24 hours, 48 hours, a week, whatever it takes. Right? If you give it to me and I can't get in, gone. Confiscated until you let me back in. Right? So this is what it takes. Mobile devices are checked in at 9 p.m. at my house. They sit on my nightstand and get recharged, and I look at them at my leisure. In the morning, when the time comes, you may have it back. There's none of this sneaking around in the middle of the night crap. That's part of the reason why my family got hit with this, is because there was a lot of internet activity that was going on in the middle of the night that I didn't know about, because I needed a full 8, right? And so I didn't know. So mobile devices can be an Achilles heel. Be careful. And then here's something cool that I recommend that you do. Go to your kiddo and say, hey, I heard about this Snapchat thing, this Instagram thing, or whatever, right? I don't know how to use that. Will you teach me? Could you imagine doing that? Going up to your kiddo and saying, will you teach me how to use this, this app that I don't know how to use? Now, that is a really good thing for you to do, because what it's going to do is it's going to send a message to your kiddo. It's like, I don't know everything, and I'd like you to teach me this one thing. Would you teach me this one thing? And it's going to feel maybe weird for them at first. They're like, what kind of trap is this? Is Admiral Akbar going to jump out at any moment? Right? What is this? But if you say, no, I'm serious. Here's my mobile device. Show me on my mobile device how this works. Well, now you're in a conversation, right? Now you're building a bridge, right? And you're starting to make it safe to talk about this stuff, these apps and these different things, right? And that's how you build trust. And at the end of the day, that's what this is really all about, is you got to have trust with your kids. Otherwise, all this other stuff, that's when it becomes a totalitarian regime, right? Is when you don't really have an open, honest, ongoing dialogue about this stuff, but you just put up all these boundaries and borders and walls and keep them from having fun.